The incident rates are far higher in minority communities.
We have a responsibility to do what we can.
There's distrust.
You have to do everything you can to make sure that you stay as safe as possible.
It's been a year since Indiana health officials first announced the outbreak of a mysterious infection that made its way across the world within a matter of weeks. The impact of this deadly virus, called COVID-19, has been devastating, impacting our day-to-day lives in ways we could never have imagined. Shelter-in-place policies, social distancing, closed businesses, lost jobs, long food lines, and even worse, the deaths of loved ones. In the United States, we have lost more than 508,000 lives, more than the population of cities like Atlanta, Miami, and Oakland, California. The death toll here in Indiana has surpassed 12,000. Our communities are mourning, especially Black and brown communities, which have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. According to the CDC, Black people are 3 times more likely to be hospitalized and 2 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than their white counterparts. The same is true for Hispanics and Native Americans. In this climate of fear, sorrow, mask wearing, and social distancing, the FDA announced the approval of 2 vaccines to protect us from COVID-19. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines were developed at a record pace within months, not years, as with other vaccines. But can they be trusted? What are the risks, the side effects? Those questions seem to be weighing heavily on the hearts and minds of minority populations who are getting vaccinated at a much slower rate than whites. Research shows that more than 11% of white Americans have been vaccinated, compared to less than 6% of Black Americans and less than 5% of Latino Americans. These statistics are alarming to health professionals who are concerned that many of the people who need the vaccine the most will be among the last to get vaccinated, if at all. We invite you to join us for a critical conversation about COVID-19, vaccines, and what it can mean for you and your family.
Hello, I'm Angela Kane, and I'm honored to be a part of this critical conversation on behalf of Eastern Star Church. You're going to hear advice from local and national health experts, including a former U.S. Surgeon General, directors from county and state health departments, and a Black woman physician and professor who has enrolled in a vaccine trial and has important insight about the safety of vaccines. And you'll hear the heartbreaking story of loss from an Eastern Star Church family. They have a message for you. But for now, let's start this critical conversation with Senior Pastor Jeffrey A. Johnson, Sr.
You're here with Eastern Star Church and the Rock Initiative, and even as we're renewing our community for the kingdom, we're seeking to have these critical conversations, answering questions about COVID-19 vaccine. I'm Jeffrey Johnson. I'm the senior pastor of the Eastern Star Church, and in our church's 100-year history, we have sought to educate in so many different areas, and especially in the area of health. And we know that there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation about COVID-19 and the vaccine. And as a pastor with a degree in theology, I didn't feel it was my place to give medical advice. But I do feel as a leader of the community that I can create opportunities for information, education, so that you and your family and your friends can make the right informed decision about what we need to do with this COVID-19 vaccine. All of our members know the safety protocols we have in place, but I want you to understand that we are socially distanced, and we've had the vaccine. I've had both doses, praise the Lord, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But we're following all the safety protocols to keep things safe. But we want to make sure that you get the right information and the truthful information so that you can make those informed decisions. And so we have 2 wonderful, wonderful experts here to help us today. And also you'll see some virtual guests that we have that bring some insight and also tell us a little bit about what God has done with them and for them through this, and how all of us are trying to do everything we can to be advocates for the Black and brown community to make sure that we are not being left out. And so today we have with us Dr. Virginia Kane, who is the director of the Marion County Public Health Department, and she's been there for several years. And so we're just so grateful to have her to be with us. Dr. Kane, thank you for being here
thank you,
today.
Reverend Jeffrey Johnson, for all your leadership that you do in the community and helping to get the truth out in terms of what's critical for all of us to know in order to protect ourselves and keep on being safe.
All right, appreciate you being with us. And then, of course, we have with us Dr. Jerome Adams. I'm sure y'all recognize him as the former U.S. Surgeon General. When I say former, I mean recently former U.S. Surgeon General. And Dr. Adams certainly has not only locally, he was even the commissioner, the health commissioner for the state of Indiana before he went national like that. We wanted to bring people that we know, people that we trust, people who are smart, and people in the medical field. So Dr. Adams, thank you for being with us today.
Well, Pastor Johnson, it is a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you to all of us for joining us here today for this very important conversation. The pastor and I talk about this. It is okay to have questions. In fact, I encourage my patients to have questions and to ask questions. But what we don't want is for misinformation to lead you into making a bad decision.
By now, all of us have heard about how COVID-19 disproportionately has affected the black and brown communities, and whether it was testing or the fact that we are in the hospital more because of COVID, we die more from COVID, and even now the CDC recently has come out to say that the life expectancy of Americans has decreased, has dropped by a year, and that's for white people. But for black people, the life expectancy has dropped 2.7 years, almost 3 years. So again, we see disproportionately how it is impacting us and affecting us. And so I wanted to just bring up the fact that when the vaccine came out, I know I started shouting, I started praising God. I know a lot of people try to separate God from science. God created science. God is the one that brought all the order into the world, so the scientists, when they're researching, have something to work with. And so I got all excited. But I want to ask Dr. Kane and Dr. Adams, I want you to respond as well. When you heard about the vaccine coming out, how did you feel when it happened? And what are some of the good and the bad that you were thinking about and even now having to address it?
So I think the initial thing when I heard about the vaccines, that I was just really excited about that. And I was also very excited about what we were initially informed about how much vaccine would be available. But some of the concerns that occurred earlier, I'm on the National Medical Association, as well as Black Physician Group, COVID Task Force. And so one of the things we wanted to make sure was have enough clinical trials involve people of color, because we have different medical conditions, and so sometimes these vaccines may react differently for people of color. So we wanted to assure ourselves that every company that's bringing vaccine to our country has sufficient numbers of people. So some of the concerns, and they, upon a lot of pressure, made sure that happened, and I know Jerome was part of that push along with other entities to make that happen. So that was the good news. Now, the bad news is that it turns out that they didn't have enough production of the vaccine like we were led to believe, or they might have had it, but the pharmaceutical companies, when some outside country comes to you and says, I'm going to pay you 3 times what the United States is paying, we might have lost some vaccine related to that. That happened very classically with our personal protective equipment. We couldn't get N95 masks because the company was selling it to all different countries, and so we didn't have a sufficient supply. So, we're kind of wondering about that.
Well, Dr. Adams, I know you were the U.S. Surgeon General when the pandemic hit, and I tell people all the time, God knew the pandemic was coming, and he knew who he wanted in place as leadership and advocates when that happened. So you at a national level, and I'm sure internationally, people were looking to the United States, calling on you. So when the vaccine came out, What was going through your head? What's the good and the bad that you got out of it?
Well, I appreciate that, and I just really want to quickly say to you and to the people who are watching that you said a couple things that really hit me in the heart, and I mean in a positive way. You said that the vaccines were a gift from God, and that was truly how I felt when we had a vaccine finally make it across the finish line, because people feel like this was rushed. I saw the death tolls every single day. I saw the case counts every single day. I pushed hard to make sure we got data broken down by demographics so that we could understand that black and brown people were being hard hit. And I really felt like as fast as it still wasn't fast enough when we look at the number of lives that were lost. You also said that God has a plan, and a lot of people gave me and still give me a hard time for working for the prior administration. But I believe God doesn't put you where you're going to be comfortable if you look at the Bible. God puts you where you're going to be able to do some work, where you're going to be able to do some good. And I want people to know that we can't afford to take 4 years or 8 years or however many years off from issues related to our health. We need to be at the table, or else we're going to be at the menu. And I fought to make sure that in the vaccine trials, we had sufficient enrollment, and there was actually an article that came out last week that talked about the fact that these COVID trials had a higher number of minorities enrolled in them than almost any other trial in history for vaccines. And that didn't happen by accident. That happened because Tony Fauci and I met with these companies every single week to make sure they were aggressively reaching out to communities and enrolling people so that when we told people to get vaccinated, they would know it's not based on someone who doesn't look like you or think like you or have the same genetics as you. It's based on trials that were done in a diverse group, a diverse audience. There are well-founded reasons for people of color to be distrustful of the government and of the medical system, and I knew that we were going to have to work hard to help people understand these vaccines were developed safely, these vaccines are highly effective, and that they are a tool from God to help save us, not something that we should be dismissing and saying, let's wait and see.
COVID-19 has taken the lives of more than 500,000 Americans. How do their families cope with loss, and where do some of them stand on vaccinations? A family that attends Eastern Star Church shares words of grief, hope, and wisdom born of pain. It was the early days of COVID-19, mid-March 2020, when we knew a virus was lurking, but we didn't know yet how deadly it would be.
He got sick. Someone on his job had a temp of 103, we were told.
That's when Leonard Trey Heiser, the 32-year-old only son of LaTanya and Leonard, began a short battle for his life.
All I can see is my visualization of my son talking to me via FaceTime and him telling me how much pain he was in. He was lying in bed. He began to cry and he explained how much, he said his exact words was, "Mama, this hurts."
The Heisers say Trey had gone for a checkup, but with COVID-19 testing scarce at that time, the doctor told him to quarantine.
Things started to get a little bit progressively worse.
So Trey's wife took him to the hospital.
She was not permitted to go in the hospital. She had to literally wait outside in the car.
And within 4 short hours of arriving at the hospital, the Heisers received a call that no parent ever wants to take. And their world came crashing down.
They tell me that my son is dead, our child is dead.
Man, when it hit us hard. It really hit us hard, and it's devastating.
I was not ready. Where did the communication breakdown happen? What happened that my baby died alone? Even if I had been there, then perhaps that might have added some kind of closure. But to know that no family should have to endure.
The Heiser family says Trey died of a heart attack triggered by COVID-19. He received the positive COVID test after his death.
You wouldn't give him a test while he's alive, but you're going to test him when he dies. What's wrong with this?
The frustration, the pain, still palpable. But the Heisers, Trey's sister, and his wife and stepchildren find joy in remembering the type of man he was.
Full of joy.
Lovable.
He was the kind of person that when he walked in the room, he just kind of like made you feel better. A jokester, he made you laugh.
And the Heisers find peace in their faith and a loving church that provides COVID relief, support, and education in troubled times.
It's okay to have fear, but God has always brought about leadership. Praise God for the kind of leadership that is here at an Eastern Star Church. They're doing the necessary steps to help us learn. We need it. That's the only way we're going to get healed.
The Heisers are using their voice to spare you their pain. They felt the heartbreaking devastation of COVID firsthand. They support getting a vaccination.
I'm 100% for it because it took my son's life. And I'm seeing too many people dying. And if this vaccine is going to help, I'm all for it. Why am I not going to try to save my life by taking the vaccine?
Why do we need to lose us to COVID? We've got to go and learn how to participate in our own healing. Go and get a shot. Do what you can do to help bring about a change.
The Heisers didn't have a chance to save their son, but they say with your family, you do.
That's love. And it's time for us to participate.
Now we'll hear from Dr. Lou Edgy, who is gaining national attention for stepping up last fall to join a 25-month trial for the Moderna vaccine. Dr. Edgy is a family physician, a professor, and an associate dean teaching medical students at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. She talked to me via Zoom. Although it has been historically hard to recruit African Americans for clinical trials due to mistrust, Dr. Edgy joined a vaccine trial after losing a loved one.
But it wasn't until my stepmother, who had been previously very healthy and vibrant, passed away over the course of a week, that I was sort of jolted into action. Just watching the rest of my siblings grieve, I felt I could do something. I could be part of the solution to this terrible pandemic. And especially since University of Cincinnati is one of the 90 sites for the Moderna trial, it was just across the street from where I actually do my everyday work. And so I went ahead and I'm recently married, and my husband wanted to make sure that I was not going to be in a trial that had any COVID vaccine or anything, virus in it. And so that narrowed us down to the Moderna and the Pfizer, which have no virus at all.
Dr. Edgy explains those vaccines use mRNA technology, which has been studied in other human clinical trials for years. She says it's like a vaccine recipe that teaches our cells how to make a harmless piece of protein that triggers an immune response to viruses. In this case, the recipe builds antibodies against COVID-19.
It just stays in for just about 24 hours at the most. And so when you do get exposed to the real virus, your body already has an army waiting to take care of it.
But what about concerns that COVID-19 vaccines have been developed too quickly?
So I've heard that a lot. I'm gonna sit this out. I'm gonna see, I want it to be out there a little bit longer. We've really been studying coronaviruses, which is the family of viruses in which this COVID virus sits, for 20 years. It just took us 66 days. We knew exactly what part to look at, what part we needed to target, because we'd done all this research for 20 years. So I liken this to the cake was baked for 20 years, and all we had to do was take 66 days to find the flavor of the icing, and then we iced the cake while we did the trial for the next 11 months. For me, it was extremely important to be in this trial because I could speak to my Black and brown patients and speak from a place of credibility. As a physician, having read the science, having been in the trial, having done very well, having realized that out of the 30,000 people who were in the trial, not a single one got severe COVID, meaning nobody got hospitalized who got the vaccine and nobody died. And that was not in the Moderna trial, not in the Pfizer trial.
And right now, Dr. Edgy is cautiously optimistic about how long Moderna's vaccine could protect us. She's staying in the trial to help researchers gauge its long-term impact.
What we do know is that if the antibodies, so my body's response and protection in my blood stays good for 4 months, then typically it will stay good for at least a couple of years. So we passed the 4-month mark, so we're very hopeful.
So would you say to people watching that this is a safe and effective vaccine?
Absolutely. And in fact, the mRNA vaccines, which are Moderna and Pfizer, are some of the safest vaccines we have ever seen developed.
And so would you advise people who are eligible, because many people aren't eligible yet, but if they're eligible, they should take it, would be
Absolutely,
your advice?
without question.
And now some COVID-19 advice from Dr. Eric Yancey, a pediatrician at Riley Children's Health in Indianapolis, and a respected and outspoken voice on community health issues.
My assumption is during this time is that everybody has COVID all of the time. And that means that if you knew somebody had the virus, how would you act? And that's what I usually recommend to adults and children as well. When you're out in a place or whatever, you have to assume everybody has it. Why? Because you don't know. And therefore, you do keep the mask up over your nose and mouth, and you maintain your distance as best as possible, and that will lead to a decrease in the community spread. We've got a situation where the children can be largely asymptomatic carriers, so they can actually get it, be able to spread it, and still not be very sick from it. So the best way to protect the children is for everybody to be safer and keep the community spread down. And that means that you have to do everything you can to make sure that you stay as safe as possible. That means your mask, the distancing. I know you really want to hug all those people, but it means nope, not right now. Let's do all these things safely so we can hug later on. What is not really out there, and maybe not even known as much, is the amount of serious disability that's actually following this disease. Many people who are what they call long haulers, who have continual problems even now. It hurts us in all kinds of areas of our lives. There are a lot of children in our community who are taken care of by, let's say, grandparents, extended family, and whatever. So let's look at what happens with those children when one of the grandparents or extended family either gets seriously ill or dies. What happens to that child at that point? What happens to that child's care? Do they end up in the system? The vaccine has been tested. The clinical trials were done in African Americans and found to be safe there as well. There's now been a huge number of African Americans who've actually received both doses of the vaccine, myself included, with no significant side effects. So we can't allow ourselves to be double victimized. Victimized at first because we don't trust the medical community, but then victimized by the fact that COVID-19 is harder on us than other people. So yes, I would strongly recommend African Americans getting the vaccine. How do we know that one of the methods that God is using to take care of us is not a safe and effective vaccine that's going to get us through it? So my thing is, yes, I believe God is going to take care of us. I believe He sends messages and messengers to allow His deliverance to occur. So I'd say go get your shot.
So joining us now to discuss COVID-19 vaccines is Antoinette Holt, the Director of the Office of Minority Health at the Indiana State Department of Health. And so thank you so much for joining us today, Antoinette.
Thank you for having me. Greatly appreciate it.
No problem. Well, your office serves vulnerable and marginalized populations in particular. So what are your biggest concerns about Black and Brown communities during this pandemic?
My biggest concerns, one is having access, making sure people have access to the vaccination when it becomes available. Right now, we're dealing with allocation per state. And so when it becomes available that we can go outside of the set parameters of just age, then we can begin to get to those that are most disparate. The other one is education, because we want people to be armed with the resources and empowered. And so getting the right, correct information, factual information is very important. So a lot of people are presently kind of waiting to see specifically what's going to happen from those individuals that have taken the vaccine. But I want to just remind you, just this historical context of the flu shot malaria, polio, all these different things. Vaccines are helping to keep those numbers and things down, and this is in the same regard.
And you were talking some about some of the things that African Americans in particular say they're most afraid of when it comes to the vaccine. What are they saying to you? What are you hearing?
Concerned about what's in the vaccine. Could the vaccine possibly make me sterile? Could the vaccine be a ploy to eliminate the Black race? And these are the different contexts and things that we've heard from people. And so, again, what we as the Department of Health wants to do, and especially the Office of Minority Health, is to make sure that you are getting the necessary resources and tools that's going to guide you in the decision that you are making to get the vaccine.
So it sounds like in spite of those fears, you support the Black community actually getting vaccinations and other marginalized populations. So why do you think it's important for them to get the vaccines?
I want to make sure that we have the best fighting chance to address and eliminate COVID. And one of those opportunities is through the vaccine. I've encouraged my parents. I drove them to go get their first shot, and hopefully this week they'll get their second dose. So I'm encouraging them, and I'm encouraging, other people in our community, again, to make the decision that's best for them. I never want to pressure anyone, but I do support getting the vaccine so we can get better and get over this. I will get it.
One of the challenges with doing anything in public health is that we don't always have the data. And so that's why one of the things that we've continued to harp on is the need to collect data based on demographics so that we understand who is being hardest hit. We knew it because we saw it in our lives, but honestly, it took a while before people actually believed that Black and brown individuals were being harder hit by this virus because we didn't have the data. So we talked about challenges with internet access. A lot of the vaccine signups are on the internet. Well, what happens if you don't have broadband internet? What if you don't have the ability to get on? There's mistrust again of hospitals and of other places that the vaccines frequently are deployed from across the country. So we've got to look at that. We need to work with churches. We should be having churches as sites where people come to get vaccinated. So that's an access point of view. But also, when you look at the categories, we originally thought about on a national level, and many places still are thinking about and debating over whether or not race should be a criterion for whether or not you get the vaccine. Whether you believe it is or not, it is ethically very hard to say, because of the color of your skin, you should or shouldn't get X, Y, or Z one way or the other. That said, one thing that I firmly believe is that we should look at risk factors, and we know that Black and brown people have a high diabetes, smoking, heart disease, lung disease, sickle cell that put them at risk, and that should be what we should be looking at. But the final point I want to make is that we shouldn't be looking at race as a number 2 or number 3 or number 4. We should be looking at race as impacting every category. So, for instance, when you look at healthcare workers, our healthcare workers within that category, even though they're tier 1, we see a significant number of people of color choosing not to get the vaccine even if they're healthcare workers. When you look at nursing homes, we see a significant number of people and people of color and immigrants within the nursing home category who've chosen not to get vaccinated. The vaccination rates among nursing home staff are down around 30 to 40%. That means 60, 70% of people who work in nursing homes are choosing not to get vaccinated, and they're disproportionately people of color. So we've got to look at the inequities within the categories. At the same time, we're looking at the big picture in terms of disparities. Otherwise, we're never going to catch up.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. And some of that is not just somebody smoking or drinking, but some of that is systemic. So you're in a neighborhood like we're in right now, that's a food desert. Mm-hmm. All the grocery stores left. That's an economic desert. Jobs left. And so we create this environment where it's hard for me to be healthy here because I don't have healthy options. And now it impacts my body, and COVID sets in, and I have a pre-existing condition, not because of bad personal choices, but because of systemic things and policies that are taking place. But that's not what we're here for.
Well, it actually is. It's because of lack of opportunity. We have to talk about what we call these social determinants of health. Your zip code is more important than your genetic code in terms of determining your outcome. And it also is more important than your genetic code in terms of determining your ability to get vaccinated, your ability to stay safe from COVID. And I'll give you a real concrete COVID example. You can come to me, and I'm your physician, and I can say you tested positive for COVID, or someone who you know has tested positive for COVID, and you need to isolate or quarantine. I can give you the best medical advice in the world, but it means nothing if I don't ask about your living environment. If I don't know that you live in a multi-generational house with 10 people who are sharing a bathroom. You can't go home and isolate or quarantine in that kind of environment. Right. You've got to ask those questions. If I don't ask how you got here, I don't know that you don't have a car, and you've got to get on the bus after I diagnosed you with COVID to go back home, and you're going to expose everybody on the bus. We have to look at these social determinants of health. We've got to address them. That's one of the challenges we have in our society now, is that we've gotten away from leveraging our faith communities as ways to help us augment those social supports that we know help people make healthy choices.
And I know that Dr. Kane agrees with that, because we've had tons of conversations about what the faith community and churches can do in opening our doors to come alongside, whether it's to help people to go online to get registered, go down to get the vaccine, or to be a place where you can come to get the vaccine. So we've had those kind of conversations. I want to go back to something you said earlier, Dr. Adams, and that is trust. Black people's trust or lack thereof of government, and whether it's, and Dr. Kane, we've been in several meetings together where you brought up the Tuskegee syphilis piece and helped and walked us through that and what that meant. But it's not just the Tuskegee piece, but there are other issues that black people have just not been dealt properly with government, even in regards to health. And now we're saying, trust this vaccine. Our government got it together. We got it in less than a year. You got to get it in your body. How do we convince black and brown people that's one of the reasons I moved ahead and got the vaccine.
Just for an inconvenience of 18 to 36 hours, where you may have some mild side effects with this vaccine, 5 to 10% will get long-term complications from COVID-19. Don't put your family or yourself at risk.
Dr.
And what I say to my family and my friends is I say, look, I've been involved with the development of the vaccines from the start. We worked with the folks at the National Institutes of Health, the FDA, the CDC, Pfizer, Moderna. I've seen these get developed from the start, and I felt that they were safe and effective to the degree that I got vaccinated. So to your point, I got vaccinated on live TV, national TV, in front of millions of people, so that people could see me get vaccinated and they would know that I felt it was safe after looking at the studies. That's number one. Number two, I want people to understand these vaccines are 95% effective at preventing serious disease. When you say a gift from God, we originally were hoping that these vaccines would be 50 to 60% effective at preventing severe disease. They're 95% effective. So you've been sent a more powerful tool than we have for almost any other disease out there. The blood pressure medications, the heart pills, all these other things cancer medications we give people, none of them come close to 95% effective at preventing disease. This is a gift from God. But we have to acknowledge Tuskegee. And the Tuskegee experiments were committed by 3 former surgeons general. It happened over 40 years, over 3 different surgeons general, my predecessors, did this. And they denied treatment to African American men of color for syphilis for the sake of science. They wanted to see what happens if we let syphilis play out. This is a tragedy. We have to acknowledge these things, because we can't tell people you're silly for being distrustful. We have to acknowledge where this distrust comes from, and there's distrust going on right now. I sat and watched George Floyd get his neck kneeled on and thought about the time in Fishers I got pulled over by the police and wondered whether or not that was going to happen to me. There's what happened back then. There's what's happening right now. We have to acknowledge these things, then we have to address them. And I want people to know that we have independent data and safety monitoring boards. We have an independent board of people who advises the FDA, and another independent board who advises the CDC to help them to look at the data and make sure these vaccines are safe and effective. And this happens because we don't want Tuskegee to ever happen again. So we have these protections in place, and that is why I feel the vaccines are safe. That's why I encourage people to ask questions, but it's also why I say, look, don't turn away this gift that God has sent us.
Can I add to that
right
point?
ahead,
So this is not new it's a new technology, but they've been doing this, what they call messenger RNA platform research for 10 years. 10 years. So, but this is our first opportunity we could use this technology on a new vaccine that does not cause COVID-19. It cannot cause the real infection. But hey, nothing personal about you guys. I got to talk about a sister. Smart as heck. Dr. Commissia Corbett, black female, 32. She's the lead scientist for NIH on that Moderna vaccine. Now, when Anthony Fauci hires you, you know you're a bad sister. She's the one that helped develop that vaccine, and just fantastic, wonderful. So it's our own people that have helped develop this vaccine and trust. You know, a lot of people don't know that, hey, if you had an accident and you bleed and you need a blood transfusion, Charles Drew was the person who developed plasma so we could even get blood transfusion, a black man. But a lot of people, that information doesn't get out there, okay? These folks are protecting us, okay? They're protecting her own mother, her family, but she's a sharp sister. Hey, I trust her any day.
And I know you have these questions. You brought up the vaccine. The mRNA vaccines do not have any virus in them. It is like sending an email to your body, and it gives your body the instructions to develop antibodies that protect you from COVID if you're exposed, and then the email gets deleted. So within 48 to 72 hours, you have nothing left in your body of that vaccine, but it's sent to you to help generate this immune response, and you cannot get COVID from getting the COVID vaccine. That's an important point that Dr. Kane brought up.
I appreciate that very much. And we do have some questions. I'm going to throw some of these out here, let y'all help us out.
Rapid fire.
These are not questions that I've come up with. These are the most asked questions that are out there. The CDC and of course, from Dr. Kane's office, the Marion County Health Department, Public Health Department here in Indianapolis. One of the questions is, if you've already had COVID, do you need to get the vaccine?
So the answer is yes. Because once you get the COVID infection, it's what's called a natural immunity, but that protection lasts for 3 months, 90 days. It may be a little bit longer, but only lasting for 90 days. So we want to encourage you that 60 days after your infection, consider getting your vaccine now. Because most of the scientists are believing that the vaccine version of giving you protection may last you 9 to 12 months. So a much longer duration of protection, especially because of these mutated strains now that are out for COVID-19.
And we're hearing about more and more cases of people who are being reinfected with COVID, being infected a second time. And to Dr. Kane's point, these variants, these mutations are what we're worried about. And so you could have gotten infected by strain A back in June of last year and recovered. Your immunity may be gone from strain A, and or you could be exposed to strain B right now. And if you're vaccinated and you get those 2 doses, then the studies show that it has cross-reactivity such that it will increase your ability to fight off not just the original strain, but the mutations. So yes, even if you've had COVID before, you should still get vaccinated.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Adams, which is another question that came in, is do we still need to wear masks after we've received the vaccine?
Yes, you do still need to wear masks after we've received the vaccine, and here's why. Number one, it takes 2 weeks for you to start developing the immunity after you've gotten the first dose of vaccine, and you don't get full protection until after you've gotten your second dose 2 weeks after that. So that's number one, to understand that you don't get immediate protection from a vaccination. Number two, the outcome that we looked at was prevention of severe disease. So if I've gotten my 2 doses of vaccine, That means that if I were to be exposed to COVID and get it, I would be 95% less likely to end up in the hospital or die. But we still don't know for sure whether or not this is highly effective at preventing disease spread. That means I could get exposed to COVID. I'm 95% more protected, but I still might be able to carry the virus and pass it along to you. So that is why we tell people to continue to wear a mask, and we all three have our mask up here today, but as Reverend Johnson mentioned, we're socially distant. We've been vaccinated. We're in a well-ventilated area. We're taking other means to protect ourselves. But you should still wear a mask when you're in public and when you're around people outside of your household, even if you have been vaccinated, until we can get the science in that tells us that you are protected and that you can't spread the virus to other people.
Dr. Adams, how long can we expect to have COVID-19 around? The flu hasn't gone anywhere. We've gotten shots. Every year we got to go get another one. How long is COVID going to be around? And we've had 2 doses. Are we going to have to get a booster? We got these variants out here. What does that look like for us?
Well, number one, it's important for people to understand cases are dropping sharply right now. That is good news, and that's for a number of reasons. We think as more and more people get vaccinated, as more and more people have some degree of natural immunity from being previously infected, as more and more people are wearing their mask, washing their hands, watching their distances, waiting to gather, and the W's that I talk about, we're seeing cases go down. And so that's good news. That's contrasted with the fact that we have variants out there, and these variants could be a game changer. And so we're in a race against the virus, and we want to stamp it out before it has a chance to evolve. And that is why it is so important that we all get vaccinated right now. So the answer to your question really is it depends on us. If we all take the measures that we know will help us prevent spread of this disease, wear a mask, wash your hands, watch your distance, wait to gather, and when it's your turn, get vaccinated, the 5 W's, we can stamp this thing out. But if we don't, and we let this virus continue to brew and mutate, this could be around for a long time. Now, you asked a question, and the honest truth is a lot of people out there right now are thinking that this virus is going to be around at a low rate for a while, but so is the flu, and we learn to deal with it. So is measles. So are other diseases out there. We want to get it down to a rate where we can get back to a relatively normal lifestyle, and when someone gets it, we have the resources to recognize it, to treat it, and to contain it. And if we can get to that place, the way we do for any number of other diseases, then we can get back to a somewhat reasonable, normal life. We may have to get booster shots in the future, but again, we have to get a flu shot every year. You've got to get a booster shot for tetanus. That is not something to be concerned about as long as we continue to develop the technology to be able to treat this virus and to adapt to new variants, then we're going to be fine. So it really comes back to us doing the things that we know work to prevent the virus spread.
Everyone's voice matters when it comes to getting through the pandemic together. These are community voices.
Well, I haven't gotten the vaccine yet, and there was a level of discomfort because I got caught up in the myths as well. I've actually been exposed to the virus a few months ago and recovered, praise God. It never got worse than a few minor cold symptoms.
After studying more about COVID-19 vaccines, Andre Munger now plans to get a vaccination.
I feel it's selfish not to get it, but I do understand the discomfort, the myths that are out there. If we can dispel those myths, I think you'll feel a little bit more comfortable about it.
I received the Moderna vaccine, and of course with that particular vaccine you have to wait 4 weeks until you get your second dose. So I received the second dose on the 27th of January, so I'm fully vaccinated as of today. And actually look at the efficacy of the actual vaccine itself. That's what, convinced me, and of course praying about this as well to make sure that it was in alignment with, how I was feeling as a child of God. Look at the facts, look at the data, and help that guide you in terms of your decision making. I would ask for individuals to explore the possibilities of the COVID-19 vaccination and its ability to save our population.
I said I wasn't going to take the shot because I didn't know too much about it, and that made me kind of nervous. So I kept putting it off. So I prayed on it. I really prayed on it. And I asked the Lord to show me or give me signs that I will be okay. In a couple of days, about 2 or 3 days, I woke up one morning and I got the answer. I had the answer, and it said I would be fine, I will be okay.
And when Raynell Freeman went to Methodist Hospital to get her vaccination, she unexpectedly made the news. She was the 100,000th person to get the vaccine at IU Health.
They had a cake and they had balloons and they took pictures and they congratulated me. And I felt very good after I took that shot.
And healthcare workers are hopeful vaccinations can soon reduce our nation's staggering death toll.
I serve as a palliative care nurse practitioner at St. Francis Hospital in Greenwood.
With palliative care, healthcare workers serve people with life-threatening or terminal illnesses, often holding end-of-life conversations.
With COVID, I have had experienced a lot of those talks, unfortunately. So it's been a very trying time for me.
How are you holding up? How do you get through some of these hard conversations you have to have with people about their loved ones?
It's been overwhelming. I don't know what I would do, without the Lord, without the support of my team and fellow nurses and fellow doctors who are and have been providing care to patients to the highest level at this time. I can't tell you the amount of people that have had to say goodbye to their mom or their father on Zoom, and just things that just feel so unnatural. And I want to do what I can and encourage others to do what they can to prevent anything like that, and really the mask wearing, the social distancing, all those things, the vaccinations are a big part of that.
Thank you, Courtney. I thank you for your work too. I'm sure that everyone at Eastern Star Church, and you're a member,
yes,
is praying for you, praying for all of our healthcare workers. I have them in my family too. And so when we mask up, when we take precautions, we keep you safe too. And it's all about really loving each other. Don't you agree?
I agree. The Bible tells us to care for our neighbors, and this is one way that we can do it. This is love in action.
Let me again say thank you to both. We're going to try to wrap this up. Here's the last thing I want to ask you all to speak to as we wrap up, because I know you all getting tons of phone calls and emails and texts and everything. Thank you for taking time out to come hang out at Eastern Star Church and the Rock Initiative. But the thing I want to ask you, one is, I want you to speak your heart as we try to get black and brown people to take this information we're giving you, go ahead and talk to your health provider, make an informed decision for you, your family, your friends, so that you can do what is best for you. And what does that vaccine look like in terms of, so speak your heart about that. And then tell us, for Marion County, Indianapolis, Indiana, where do we go to get it? How do we, if somebody's listening saying, I want to get the vaccine, I don't know where to go get it. So help us with that for Indiana, and Dr. Adams, help us with that on a national level. What do people need to do with that?
I think the key for us is especially for people of color, that we have to have special programs in order to reach out to you, especially our heart to reach individuals, even like our homeless population. So I have to compliment our Jeffrey Johnson. Initially, when we were having problems, our people of color could not find a place to do testing. It was not happening compared to going to hospital settings or going to urgent cares. A lot of times they got turned away, or they just said, hey, don't come. So what we had to do was we had to start saying, hey, where are our people located in Marion County? And we had to do what they called these pop-up sites of doing testing in the heart of our people of color sites. And I have to say, Reverend Jeffrey Johnson stepped up to the plate. He was the first location that we put a site there in order to do testing for COVID-19. And let me tell you, people were coming in droves. And so we have since then have probably done over about 20 churches. And they wanted to be tested because one of the pop-ups we had on just a one-day Saturday, we had over 500 people come to be tested for COVID-19 We set it up for 9 to 1. We didn't leave until 7 o'clock at night, and we had to call local enforcement to say, hey, stop these cars. We just can't take any more. We're sorry. And they were lined up. So we're going to try to do something very similar for vaccinations, where we're going to partner with churches. We're going to get our hospital systems to partner with churches and make it available where they can come and get vaccinated at a site that they are familiar with, have had resources provided to them, and we'll have to have a special registration for them, so that we need to assure ourselves that it's the people who are the hardest reach are actually getting the vaccination who deserve it related to that. So look for that happening in the future. That's going to come very, very soon. And so we're excited about this with the new vaccines coming out.
But where can they go online now? There's a number that they can call?
So there's a number that they can call. The primary number that they're calling is a state number. So that's called 211. And for those who don't have the techie or internet or computer savvy to get their appointments on early. And so then for those who are internet conscious, they can do it at ourshot.in.gov. Ourshot.in.gov. And we have had 2 numbers from the local health department. You can look on our site to see our testing hours, what we have related to that. But shortly, for this new initiative we're going to kick off, that information will be spread primarily through our people of color venues only in order to get registered to get this vaccination. So we hope to be operational within the next 2 weeks related to this.
Dr.
I just want to finish with some real talk here. We had a major in a long-awaited and long-needed reckoning last year in regards to social justice, precipitated by what happened with George Floyd. And I want people to understand that there are a couple of hundred black and brown people who die at the hands of law enforcement officers every year. And that got people to the point where they were out in the streets. They were protesting. They were exercising their civic responsibilities and rights to say this is wrong, and we don't ever want this to happen again. What I want you to understand is that in any given year, thousands, and in a bad year, over 10,000 black and brown people die from the flu, from a vaccine-preventable disease. And I say that because I want us to really think about vaccine disparities as one of our greatest social injustices. Vaccines are a tool that God has sent us. They are safe, they are effective, and they prevent us from dying. But misinformation has caused many people to fear vaccines, to not get them. And so we can't let misinformation and mistrust continue to be a reason that we make choices that are bad for our health. And so I really want to encourage people to ask your questions and continue to call on your faith leaders to have conversations like this so that you can get your questions answered and you can make an informed decision, number one. Number two, talk to your civic leaders and demand, as Dr. Kane said, that they put testing sites, vaccination sites in your community, that they're accessible to you, because if you don't, you best believe somebody else out there is arguing that it should be in their community. And the final point I would make, and this is a hard conversation to have, but I think it's incredibly important for us to have this conversation, is that, again, I talked about access and I talked about hesitancy. Dr. Kane and I can both tell you, we've been in rooms with people who don't understand the challenges historically that people of color face. And we're fighting to say, put these resources in black and brown communities. And what do they say to us? They say, well, they aren't going to show up anyway. And so when we have a less than 30% uptake when the vaccine is available among people of color, that just gives certain individuals the excuse to say, why should we even try to put it in your community? You're not going to take it anyway. So I'm calling on you all as we all fight to increase access and to answer questions to lower trust, to please ask your questions, get them answered, share the facts so that we don't give them one more reason to not give us the resources that we need to protect ourselves and our loved ones.
Thank you very, very much.
So thank you. My younger sister just got her second shot earlier today, and she's just so proud and excited about that.
Well, I'm glad that she listened to her sister.
And even though Pastor Johnson said he didn't have any side effects, I want you all to know that some of you may have side effects. And I had sore arm after mine. You could have a little bit of a fever. You could have you could feel a little bad for a few hours afterwards. But guess what? That's a whole lot better than feeling a whole lot bad and ending up in the hospital or dying. If you do feel bad, that actually tells us that the vaccine is working. Some people actually feel bad because when you're building up that antibody, that immune response, that's your body's way of helping us understand that it saw that vaccine and it's creating those antibodies. So that's normal. Even though you didn't have it, and not everyone will have it, and even if you don't have that type of reaction, it doesn't mean that the vaccine isn't working. But I want you to know it's normal, it's customary, and it actually could mean for you that your body is mounting a very robust immune response and that you are protected against the virus.
Thank you very much.
So I'm excited to say, hey, just locally here, our positivity rate has gone down dramatically. We're less than 5% positivity rate, and our daily cases are about 123 a day, where in December we had 2 days that over 1,000 cases in Marion County was reported. So I have to thank the community and the public for really doing those precautions that they needed to do. And never forget, though, 40% of our residents have no symptoms. They feel great. They don't know that they're infected, so still take those precautions. And, hey, we're getting closer and closer back to our normal life.
Thank you, Jerome Adams. Thank you, Dr. Virginia Kay. Yeah, just to have this kind of medical professionals with us today, with this kind of expertise and experience to bring us the education and information we need. It makes me feel better because I know our brothers and sisters are going to go handle their business with themselves and their families and their friends, so it means a lot. And let me say thank you to all of those who participated in these critical conversations as we bring the answers to the COVID-19 vaccine. So all of you who participated, thank you so very, very much for helping us to do something very, very positive. It's going to be a blessing in our community, and especially the Heiser family and your son, Trey, who we all love here at Eastern Star Church, and his young family. Our heart goes out, and we're praying for the Heiser family. But thank you for speaking to us today. And Trey and my oldest son were best friends, and Trey's been in my home hundreds of times and eaten plenty of meals, and he can eat too. So, but I'm glad that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But our prayers go out to you. Thank you for helping us with this. Now we have, let me say this too. I did get the vaccine. I'm trying to show you that it's okay. I got both doses. I had no side effects. Don't mean you won't have any. It's a relief to be able to go around some people who haven't quite understood the importance of what the virus is doing. So handle your business. And we have on our website all the information that you would need to help you make that decision. EasternStarChurch.org/COVID-19. EasternStarChurch.org/COVID-19. And we'll have a link to the Marion County Public Health Department and a link to the Indiana Health Department and the CDC, so you can get more information and more education so you can make an informed decision. I love you guys very much, and I hope this was a blessing to you. God bless you.